Okay. Okay. I don't really know how to start this other than hello. Recently, two things have happened. Have just, I guess, really triggered like a thought stream, I guess. And I've spoken to several people about it, and I've even written it down in my journal, but I still I just keep thinking about it. Well, I guess I'll just say what the two things were, and I guess I'll say my thoughts because I just have to, I guess, get them out into the void. But so recently I took an art history class, and one of the final assignments was a creative project, right? We could either write a poem based on a work of art by Van Gogh, or we could create a self-portrait in the style of Van Gogh. I chose to do a self-portrait, and actually I'll get it. I'll show you it. I'll show you it. Hold on. So this, wait, I'll have to do the thing that influencers do. Hold on. So this was the self-portrait that I made, right? It's not the best, I admit. And when I finished it, I wasn't really happy with it. But I did it myself, and I submitted it, and I had gotten a grade on it. So the way that the class worked was if you submitted it before the Zoom call that we had to do, because it was a hybrid class, then you would get your grade, and then presenting it to the class was optional. So I had already gotten my grade, and like I said, I wasn't really happy with the way that it turned out. So I wasn't going to present it to the class. That was until a classmate of mine went ahead of me, and what she presented was an AI photo of herself in the style of Van Gogh. And it was like, she didn't even try to hide the fact that it was just straight up AI slop, right? And I was honestly beside myself, because like, how do you, I don't know, like, just how do you think that is, first of all, how do you think that that is an acceptable thing to turn in to an art history professor? Like, this woman has a doctorate in art history, but it just like, how can you justify that in your mind? And I was really frustrated listening to her kind of, I guess, justify her use of AI and try to make it sound like her prompting session was in any way similar to Van Gogh's creative process. Like, I was just sitting there, like, it was in the middle of the heat wave here in Europe, and I live in Germany. My house has no air conditioning, so it was like 96 degrees in my house. The Zoom call was at 6 p.m., so I was already, like, my brain was already mush for the day. I had to sit here on this freaking Zoom call and listen to this woman talk about how she had to type in prompts to get the image that she wanted. And how, no, actually, it was very similar to Van Gogh, and it was really interesting. What are we doing? Like, what are we doing? And then, so I was really frustrated about that. And like I said, I wasn't going to share the painting that I did because I had already gotten a grade on it. And again, I wasn't very happy with it until that classmate went. And then it was just kind of like, not really a wake up moment, but it just made me so mad. I was like, how dare you screen share this slop and put it up on my screen? Like, how dare you make me look at this? And so even though I wasn't happy with my work and I wasn't going to share it, I did, because it kind of just made me realize, like, even though I am not happy with the way that this turned out, it's not perfect, it doesn't look the way I want it to, I made it with my own two hands, right? I could at least do that for this class, like for this art class that we're taking. So I shared it just out of spite because, you know, I felt like my classmates deserved to see like real human art, you know? Even if it's not perfect, even if it isn't good, even if, you know, my eyes aren't proportional or whatever. I was like, you know, there's no point in me being ashamed of my work when my classmates are out here doing this, you know? So that was like really frustrating and upsetting to me. And that happened like at the beginning of last month, I think. But that was the first thing that happened. And I was just like really shocked because I feel like, at least for me, people being like overly reliant or just even casually using like generative AI is something that you hear about all the time. But for me, like the people in my circle are very much like creatives, very much artists, very much do not like generative AI. So it was just kind of like a shock. Like I was so taken aback to see this kind of unabashed use and presentation of just like, here's what I made. Girl, you didn't make that. You did not make that. And how dare you try to pass it off as an acceptable assignment? Anyway, the next thing that happened that was really disappointing, and I think that kind of pushed me to make this video, was there's a K-pop group that I really like that I've been listening to since 2017, I think 2016, the K-pop group Red Velvet, right? I love their music. I think they are the most talented group to come out of that industry, to be honest. I like have almost all of their physical albums. Like I love Red Velvet. And so imagine my excitement when I hear that they're having a comeback, right? And it's a mermaid concept, right? Red Velvet is doing a mermaid concept. Imagine my excitement. And then imagine how quickly it turns into disappointment when the schedule that they release is AI slop. So, but it was just so disappointing to learn. Like, you have this entertainment company who is one of the biggest in Korea, SM Entertainment, and they're resorting to, like, they used to use like practical effects and have real set designers, and it was so cool and it was so creative. Like Red Velvet is known for their creative concepts, so it's really disappointing to see them very blatantly just kind of be like, okay, here, since I want it, here. Like, both of these instances kind of just made me think and do some realizing. I guess this is the year of realizing things for me. But I guess really the first point of reflection for me with these two instances was kind of just the concept of self-deprecation, but particularly like self-deprecation around creative abilities, but just self-deprecation in general. Like listening to my classmate try to justify her lack of effort kind of just made me realize that the frustration that I feel about my lack of creative ability, or I guess technical skill, not really even creative ability, but technical skill, is kind of pointless, because ultimately I'm the one that put paintbrush to paper and she didn't, right? And I'm not like, that's not me being on my high horse, but actually it is. I am being on my high horse about this because I put effort into that painting and I used my own brain and my own knowledge and my own skill to create a painting, and she didn't. So it's kind of pointless to look at the painting that I made, good or not, and feel bad about it when there are people out here who can't even pick up a paintbrush to begin with, right? But then that also got me thinking of just like humans' tendency to self-deprecate in general, and especially in this age of AI and inauthenticity of why do we continue to self-deprecate when AI has made it increasingly clear that human skill and the ability to improve through, I guess, passion and willingness and hard work is infinitely more valuable than being perfect immediately, right? We know what happens when you type in a prompt and a perfect image comes out. I feel like, and I'm glad to see that more and more people are realizing that anything made by human hand is inherently valuable. I feel like, especially online, there are a lot of elitists when it comes to art, and we'll get to that. You know, what I made wasn't perfect, but because I was able to implement, you know, my knowledge and my interpretation, and physically paint with my own hands, that the experience was better. And I think that makes what I created, you know, again, inherently more valuable, even if it's not good. The whole ordeal just made me realize that, you know, self-deprecation and devaluation of your own skills and your own abilities and your capability, you know, only really hurts you. You're the one that's holding yourself back from becoming better. Self-deprecation is an attempt to shield ourselves from others' criticism by preemptively criticizing ourselves. I think the impulse to self-deprecate has been made significantly worse by the internet and social media, because there's just this impulse to be as negative as possible. I deleted most of my social media back in December of 2024 just because I realized, like, this is not helping me in any positive way. Like, this is not positively contributing to my life in any way, shape, or form. And I just felt like it was almost like a competition to see who could come up with like the quippiest, meanest comment to leave under somebody's video. And so I really can't blame people for feeling like they have to tear themselves down, or feeling like they can't just unapologetically post whatever they want to post, you know? I think when you post yourself online, you know, particularly on platforms like Instagram or TikTok, and if you aren't pretty and if you don't have a digestible personality, you'll get ripped to shreds. And that's just like the nature of the internet. Like, if you're not funny, if you don't look nice, if you can't sell people things, like, why are you even alive? It's just so, the culture and the atmosphere online is just so overwhelmingly negative, and it's just hateful. And that's not anything new. Like, everybody knows that the internet is miserable. And I don't mean to sound like one of those middle-aged ladies who are afraid of alarm clocks, but I genuinely believe something demonic happens when people on the internet feel as though they've been given permission to hate someone or something. It's no wonder why self-deprecation is kind of like the default. Again, especially in art spaces, if you have like an unconventional art style, or if you make like fan art or original characters, the reception to that is horrible. Like, people do not take kindly to originality, in my opinion. And so I think it's really easy to get in your own head about what you make and how you present it online, and even the thoughts that you think about your own art. You know, if you're constantly ingesting content that is hypercritical, you're going to build up this big block in your head of like, when I do this, it doesn't turn out right, and so I shouldn't even try, you know? One, it's no wonder that people self-deprecate, but it's also no wonder that people build up personas online, you know? I think online, real, genuine humanness is punished. And that sounds very dramatic, but I think it's true. Again, like, unless you're pretty or people think you're funny, but even that, if people think you're funny, but then you make a video and people think it's not funny, then you're just annoying. So this leads me to kind of another thought that I had. I think it's a big talking point on the internet now of trying to find authenticity. There's definitely a dichotomy happening online where any sort of individuality or alternativeness is, I think, shamed or, discredited as being like cringy or you're corny. But then at the same time, the same people who will say things like that talk about there being a lack of authenticity online. And I don't know if this is a hot take, but I think that people searching for authenticity online are never going to be satisfied in their search for it. I think that the internet is just inherently inauthentic. You know, the Hawthorne effect has us all in its grasp, which, if you don't know, the Hawthorne effect is the phenomenon where people change the way that they act when they know that they're being watched. Even though, the Hawthorne effect can take place in many scenarios, when you get to meet people face to face and you get to know them, I think your guard eventually slips and you can be yourself. Like, I think it's pretty common for people to be quite shy when meeting strangers, but then when they become friends, their real personality comes out. And it's because you've made a connection with that person. But I think that connection just can't happen online. I'm sitting here looking at myself at my laptop and looking at a little white light, so I know to look in the camera. It's completely different than talking to someone face to face. I think that instead of trying to kind of manufacture that authenticity, because that's what people are doing, in my opinion, I think authenticity is, like, you can't be sold authenticity. And so I think that's why there's just kind of this void online in terms of like what people are searching for. And I also think that people confuse authenticity, like when we're speaking about people online, like creators online, I think that people confuse authenticity for parasocialism. I think that you don't actually want authenticity with the creators that you watch. You want to feel like they're authentic. You want to feel like, you're on a FaceTime call with your best friend. Because at the end of the day, you don't know these people. Like, they might feel like, your big sister or a friend on a FaceTime call, but that persona that they're showing could be completely made up, So that is just also something that it sort of made me think about. It sounds very elementary, I think, to say it out loud. Maybe the good art was the friends we made along the way, but it's different to hear that, all art is good art. And, any effort that you put in is worth it, even if it doesn't turn out right. But it's another thing to really internalize that of like, I've spent all this time, beating myself up for not being as good as other people when it comes to creating things, not being, not having as much knowledge, not being as technically skilled. But that it really doesn't matter, you know, because I have fun drawing. I have fun making videos. I have fun, you know, writing, doing creative writing. Even if it's not good, it's still something that I enjoy doing. It's still something that, you know, I'm making with my own hands. It's something that I get to experience, you know. I think people unfortunately kind of view art now as a commodity, as something to just kind of consume, to look at, to watch, to listen to, instead of, you know, a process, I guess. Viewing art as a commodity is, I think, dangerous, you know. Art isn't there to just be pretty. It isn't there to just be on a billboard. It isn't even there to be good. I think ultimately art is for, unless you make like art for advertisements, art is for the artist and not for the consumer, you know, not for the audience. And I think it's important to keep that in mind. And I think art that's made to be consumed is not real art. I have to burp. I feel like I'm a lot more coherent whenever I just make Snapchat videos and send them to my sister, even though this is literally no different because I'm talking to myself either way. And I don't know if anything coherent will come out of this video. I might just watch 38 minutes and 13 seconds of myself talking and feel like I didn't get anything out of it, you know? Anyway, I think those two scenarios just made me kind of mad enough to feel like I have to, I guess, share it with the void, because this video probably won't be seen by anybody but my sister and my grandmother. Hello. And I don't know if there's like a clear through line in my thinking between like AI and self-deprecation and authenticity, but it's just something that I wanted to talk about, something that I've been like mulling over in my mind for weeks and weeks. I don't really have a conclusion. Like I guess, did I write concluding thoughts? Let's see, what did I write here? In order to obtain the true and genuine authenticity we're searching for, we must not be afraid to be vulnerable. We must embrace the imperfection and acknowledge the value in it. That is where the genuine authenticity lies. Girl, that is so corny. I'm sitting here admonishing other people for calling things corny, but excuse the cognitive dissonance, I guess. That's what I have to say. I think AI sucks, and pick up a pencil and get off your phone. So yeah, in conclusion, bye.